Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolute greatest paradox of modern wealth. Seriously, this is a paradox that fundamentally dictates how we spend, how much we stress, and ultimately, whether we ever actually achieve financial freedom. We're going to look at the exact moment a switch flips in your financial life, which, spoiler alert, happens the very day you stop performing wealth for other people. Picture a guy named Peter. He's drumming the steering wheel of a leased, top-tier German sedan, wearing a shiny $1,100 watch and quietly carrying a $900 monthly car payment. Now contrast him with Laura. She's sipping coffee from a dented thermos in a 2014 Camry. It's got 190,000 miles on the dash and a totally unglamorous coffee stain on the passenger seat. When you just glance at these two in traffic, your brain categorizes them instantly, right? Peter is clearly winning, and Laura's just getting by. Except, one of them is literally one bad month away from absolute financial collapse. And I'll tell you right now, it is not the woman in the Camry. Laura quietly has more money than her own dentist. And today, we are going to break down exactly why our society gets this so completely backward. As we go through all of this, I want you to hold on to a really disturbing question. How can your neighbor winning the lottery push you into bankruptcy? No, really. We're going to unpack a fascinating Federal Reserve study that answers this exact open loop a bit later, so definitely stick with me on that. Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, the myth of looking rich. Let's start with a fact that should genuinely annoy you. The entire visual language of wealth that we're bombarded with every single day, it's pretty much a lie we've all just agreed to believe. When researchers surveyed thousands of actual American millionaires, they found half of them had never paid more than $399 for a suit. The median price for their watches, $235. But then you look at the other end of the spectrum, 41%. According to a recent Goldman Sachs survey, that is the percentage of people earning between $300,000 and $500,000 a year who describe themselves as living paycheck to paycheck. Just think about that. Paycheck to paycheck on almost $500,000 a year. That's a higher rate of financial distress than folks earning between 50 and 100 grand. The people who look the absolute most successful are somehow outbroking the middle class. The data here is a total shock to the system. You know what the single most common car brand is among actual American millionaires? It's not Mercedes, it's not BMW, it's Toyota. In fact, households pulling in under 100 grand buy more than twice as many luxury vehicles as genuinely high-income households do. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that the fancy badge on the hood isn't a signal of wealth. It's almost always just a signal of a massive monthly payment that's anchored to a completely normal income. Which brings us to Section 2, the traps of lifestyle creep. We really need to understand this sneaky psychological mechanism making all these high earners broke. It starts with a trap identified way back in the 1700s called the Diderot effect. So it's named after this French philosopher who was gifted a truly beautiful scarlet robe. But suddenly his old desk looked incredibly shabby sitting next to his gorgeous new robe. So he replaced the desk, but then his chair didn't match the new desk. Then the art on the walls felt too cheap, so that had to go. He literally spent himself into absolute debt just to chase the standards set by one nice piece of clothing. This is the engine of lifestyle creep. You get a promotion, you buy a nicer car, and suddenly your apartment feels kind of embarrassing. So the apartment gets an upgrade, the furniture gets upgraded, and every single purchase quietly resets your definition of normal. And trust me, normal is the most expensive thing you will ever buy. Then we hit the second trap, which is hedonic adaptation. And honestly, this one is just deeply unfair. You buy the shiny new thing, you get this massive spike of joy, and then within a few weeks, your brain simply shrugs. It treats the new thing as the new baseline. That dream sports car, it just becomes the heavy hunk of metal you take to get groceries. So what do? We go out looking for the next spike. The treadmill speeds up, and you end up spending substantially more money just to stand in the exact same emotional spot. Let's look at where this hits hardest in Section 3, the car loan disaster. Nowhere is this psychological machine more efficient and ruthless than at the car dealership. That's exactly where Peter, from our very first example, is trapped right now. Nobody at the dealership is explicitly lying to you. They've just gotten extraordinarily good at selling you a number that isn't the real number. Step 1. You walk in sweating over a $40,000 price tag, and they never let you think about it again. They only talk in terms of monthly payments. Step 2. To make that payment feel small, they stretch the loan term out to 84 months. 7 years? You're going to be making payments on that car until it's old enough to be in second grade. Every objection your rational brain raises is just smoothed over by tacking on another year of payments. They are selling you a feeling, guys, not a vehicle.
And the real-world results of this are staggering. Nearly 1 in 5 new car buyers right now is signing up for a payment of over $1,000 a month. But here's where it tips from a bad deal into a financial horror movie. Because these loans run so long, cars lose value way faster than you pay them off. Roughly a third of people trading in a car right now are underwater by an average of over $7,000. So what does the dealership do? They just happily roll that $7,000 into the new loan. This is exactly what Peter is doing. He's actively financing a car he no longer owns, just to drive a car he already cannot afford.
And this bizarre logic of hyperfinancing, it's bleeding into literally everything else. We are financing the absurd. Last year, people were putting $50 down on payment plans just to stand in a field at Coachella. You can now split fast food burritos into 4 easy payments. But this next stat, this is the one that stops you cold. 25% of people using Buy Now Pay Later apps are using them to buy daily groceries. Let me be incredibly clear here. If you are splitting bread and eggs into 4 installments, the core problem isn't the inflation on the eggs. The problem is that massive, heavy $900 car payment sitting in your driveway, looking expensive while draining your accounts.
All right, moving to section 4, the lottery neighbor effects. Let's finally close that open loop I mentioned at the very beginning about the Federal Reserve study. Researchers looked at actual bankruptcy records in neighborhoods where one person hit the lottery. They found that the bigger the lottery prize, the more the neighbors, not the winner, mind you, but the neighbors, went bankrupt. Why? Well, when they looked at what those bankrupt neighbors had been buying, it wasn't invisible things like stocks or paying down debt. It was highly visible things: cars, boats, motorcycles. Because when the Joneses suddenly had more, the neighbors didn't try to get richer, they just tried to look richer. And it literally bankrupted them. It completely proves that this financial disease is entirely about appearances. You aren't competing with your bank balance, you're competing with whoever pulls up next to you at a red light. This takes us to section 5, the cruel poverty premium. Now, what's really interesting, and honestly pretty dark, about this whole explainer is the uncomfortable flip side of a concept. Opting to look poor when you actually have money is an incredible luxury. It's a cheat code. But being forced into it because you are actually broke, that is heavily penalized by the system. If your credit is wrecked and you just desperately need a reliable car to get to work, the identical car that costs a wealthy buyer a 5% interest rate is going to cost you 16, 18, or even 22%. You're paying 3 times the price for the exact same vehicle simply because you look risky on a computer screen. Banks are essentially institutions that will only lend you an umbrella on a sunny day.
This is what economists call the poverty tax. We're talking payday loans hitting a ridiculous 400% APR, rent-to-own stores where you end up paying $1,000 for a $200 television, car insurance rates that are 2.5 times higher for the exact same driving record, purely based on credit scores and your zip code. A century ago, the economist Thorstein Veblen coined the phrase conspicuous consumption to describe rich people buying expensive things just to show off. But this data shows the complete reverse. A conspicuous poverty tax that is automatically charged to people at the bottom, making the climb out absolutely brutal. You are effectively charged extra for the crime of already not having enough money. Let's finish with section 6, the math of true wealth.
So how do we actually escape this rigged game? How do we avoid the money dysmorphia of trying to keep up and get onto Laura's path? The math is almost insultingly simple. Take that exact $700 monthly car payment that Peter's throwing into a depreciating piece of metal. Instead of spending it, Laura puts it into a basic index fund and completely forgets it exists. Over 30 years, at a normal long-term return rate, that single redirected monthly payment turns into roughly $850,000. Push the return just slightly higher and it crosses $1 million. One version buys a rotating series of depreciating sedans and a permanent stress ulcer. The other, it buys a fully paid off life.
And here is the absolutely crucial takeaway about this math. Your savings rate when you are young dictates everything. If you wait just 5 years to start, say starting at 35 instead of 30, you don't just lose 5 years of contributions. Oh no, you lose all the compound growth those early dollars would have provided for the rest of your life. That 5-year hesitation creates a staggering $300,000 gap in retirement. The dollars you have in your 20s and 30s are literally the most powerful dollars you will ever hold.
And you know what? The wealthiest people on planet Earth purposefully use this exact cheat code. Look at Warren Buffett. He still lives in the same Omaha house he bought in 1958 for $31,000, eating a $3 fast food breakfast. Look at the late founder of IKEA, driving a 20-year-old Volvo and buying clothes at flea markets. They look poor by every single visual cue we've been trained to read. That is not an accident, folks. The costume of wealth is almost always just a confession of debt. Which brings us right back to Lara. Lara's path isn't about just being cheap or miserably depriving herself of joy. It's about what that coffee-stained Camry actually purchases. It doesn't buy a car. It buys a no. It buys the permanent and visible freedom to walk into a toxic boss's office and turn down a promotion that demands longer hours. She is happily trading the 4 seconds of parking lot applause from total strangers for the absolute, unshakable freedom to walk away whenever she wants. And that wraps up our explainer for today. The whole contest of looking like you have the right amount of money is a totally rigged game. The only way to win is to simply stop playing. Let them underestimate you all the way to the bank. So I'll leave you with this final, heavy question to ponder. What are you currently performing for others, and what are you willing to trade today for the freedom to say no tomorrow? Think about it. We'll see you next time.